Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shavi's Pedig Dalid Halacha Beis. We're learning today Daf Chav Ches, Daf Koyach. We left off on Daf Chav Ches, Amid Aleph, 7 lines from the top of the Amid all the way the last word, Rabbi Avuna. We are in middle of the sugya of Kiddush Hashem, and as we learned yesterday, that for the 3 cardinal sins of Gilui Aroya is Shvichas Damim and Avodah Zarah. A person has to give their lives, even if they are being told to violate it in private, and according to most, even if the one who is challenging them is not doing it because of they want the Jew to break his religion, even if they're doing it lahanos atzman, even there, a person has to give up their lives. Masha Enkin, when it comes to all the other Avedas, if there is religious persecution and the person is being told for religious reasons to break any, even only Jewish custom, barabim means in front of 10 other Jews or more, then they have to also go, we have to go al Kiddush Hashem. But if the person is being coerced for the other Avedas, either in private, or even if it's being done in public, but it's being done lahanos atzman, not for religious purposes, but simply because that person wants to benefit from my violation, then a person is not commanded to go al Kiddush Hashem. Another thing we spoke out yesterday is that there is a machlokes really to shoinim whether a person will be allowed to give up their lives. They're not obligated. Are they allowed? The Rambam holds they're not allowed. The Rambam says that if they do so, it's like committing suicide. Many Rishonim disagree, and regardless, I'll bring up one story that we remember. We had it twice in Bavli. Elisha Bal Kenofayim, if you remember, how he wore tefillin and they ran after him, and then he took it off, and then he opened up his hands, and there was doves or doves' wings. Why was he wearing it? Why, even if it was religious persecution, right? He could have worn it in private, and it wasn't religious persecution in public. He wasn't not putting on tefillin in front of 10 Yidden. So if we see that Yechidei Segula, let me word it that way, special people would give up their lives, even if they would not be obligated to give up their lives, and we'll leave it at that. I want to share a few words of introduction because we're still in the middle of this topic, that Maharal says something gavaldik. He says, what's unique about these 3 sins? So he says, since we know in Pirkei Avos that the pillars of the world are Torah and Avodah and Gemilas Chasadim. So he says that these 3 cardinal sins, they correspond, they are the opposites of the 3 pillars. And therefore, since they are the pillars of the world, you can't violate them because you're gonna destabilize the whole world. So he writes like this, that Torah and Avodah and Gemilas Chasadim are easier. Avodah is serving God. The opposite of that is Avodah Zarah. Gemilas Chasadim is helping your fellow Jew. The opposite of that is killing someone else. Shvichas damim. So it's easy to see how it's the opposite. What about Torah and Gilui Aroyos? So the Maharal says that Torah is the highest pursuit that we can have. It elevates our highest faculty, one's mind. We're connecting to God through our Chabad. Aroyos is the lowest function of man. Of course, when we do it at the right, when a person has a marital relation with his wife, when it's permitted, we elevate the lowest element of human behavior. But it's still, we're beginning with something very earthly. So this is how one is opposite the other, so says the Maharal. Okay, this is where we're up to. Now, what we will open up today, again, Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph, is a question whether Goyim are commanded also to give up their lives, either if they are being coerced to serve Avodah Zarah, or maybe by Goyim, the question is, as we'll see, if they're being told, coerced to break any of their Sheva mitzvahs for religious reasons. Since God commanded the Goyim to keep the Sheva mitzvahs, and a Goy, right, becomes a Chasidi Umas Ha'olam, and theoretically he can become a Ger Toishav, he accepts to keep the Sheva mitzvahs because God said so. What happens if he is going to be coerced? Is he also commanded? That's an interesting question. Al Kiddush Hashem, or is the Kiddush Hashem something unique for Yidden? And the latter is correct. That Kiddush Hashem, the Nikdashti, is b'toich b'nei Yisrael. And the Gemara will actually give two sources from which we'll see that Goyim are not commanded to give up their lives al Kiddush Hashem. That will be the end of the topic of this great Shas Sugya. And then we're going to fly back, we're going to fall back to our Sugya of Shvi'is. We learned in our Mishnah that there was a knas for the person who was Nitaiva or Nidaira, that the person cannot use their field Lamatzei Shvi'is, for however long that means. We also learned yesterday that during the times of the Roman government persecution, right, Rabbi Yanai, they actually said that you can plant, you can plow. That's what we learned. We never learned to explicitly plant, but you can do some minimal amount of work. We also learned already yesterday that the moment that government gezerah was lightened, Rabbi Yanai made it clear that we no longer may plow our fields. The question that we will have today is whether if someone later plowed their fields, nitaiva or nidaira, whether the penalty of loisizra lamatzoi shvius came back, or maybe that penalty was never reimposed. That will be the question that we will have today. We will see it's a machlokes really amoyroim, and that will lead us into another machlokes amoyroim, and that will be when a person takes produce from their own field on shvius. Now, really, their produce is not theirs because Hashem said that the field is open for all to take. When a person takes something that's not his, he acquires it either by lifting it, right, hagbah, meshicha, or putting it into one's keli, chatzer. However, all of that works when a person's intent is to acquire. Most people didn't know that produce in their fields halachically really does not belong to them. They understood that they have to open up the fields for everyone to share in their produce, but they viewed it as theirs. A person who has that in their minds, when they lift it, or when they put it into their keli, they don't do that with the intent to acquire it because they think it's already theirs. Will they acquire it when they lift it? For sure not. Will they acquire it if they put it into their keli? Maybe, machloikas. Why is putting it into their keli different? Because kinyan chatzir works even if you don't intend, even if you don't even know that something fell into my property. If something entered my property, now there's all the chatzir amishtameres. You have to know many details, but generally, my property acquires for me even if I don't know it's there. So you see, you don't need to have das. You don't need to have that knowledge. So maybe the keli will acquire even if I think I don't need to make a kinyan. That's going to be a machloikas amoyroim. And that's going to lead us into some great agadata about Rabbi Tarfon, and we'll leave it at that, and let's right away dive into the Gemara. Chavches Amud Aleph, 7 lines from the top all the way at the end, Rabbi Avuna. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Avuna, Ba'a Kumei Rabbi Imi. He asked him this famous question, Goyim, Ma'u sheyu mitzuvam al kiddush Hashem. Are they commanded to give up their lives? Now, there's a big machlokes rishonim that are brought down here, Marafulda and the Rashidilio, that will either limit or broaden the question. The Marafulda brings a Rashi down. Look inside Marafulda, 2 lines from the top of the Amid. Goyim ma'u sheyu mitzuvam al kiddush Hashem. So the Marafulda, quoting Rashi, understands that this question is only regarding avodah zarah, because now that we established that even a Jew, lahavdul, is only obligated to give up his life, her life, for the 3 cardinal sins, avodah zarah, gila aroi shvichas damim, fisha goyim mitzuva al avodah zarah, which is quite amazing. So mechuyev limsar atzmei befaresa v'lei harek. Maybe a goy befaresya only befaresya is obligated to give up his life, or not. But he's limiting the Marafulda. This is really a Rashi, is limiting the question only on avodah zarah. This has to be explained. Why not at least on Gilo Aroyas? Guys, don't forget that. How do you remember? What are the Shema Mitzvahs B'nai Noach? I'm repeating my teacher's Torah, Rabbi Leib Shapiro, Shlita. It's a great, I remembered it. He gave a mnemonic. He says, what are the Sheva Mitzvahs? The 3 cardinal sins. Avodah zarah, gil aroi, shvichas damim, gavaldik. Even though, with the details that the definition of gilei aroyos by the goy is more limited than how it is defined by a yid. We just learned this in Rambam. I know we're already up to Hilchas Shabbos. It feels like yesterday we were learning Hilchas Malachim, where the Rambam tells you how many aroyos are forbidden on a goy. much less than on a Yid, much less. Anyways, these are details, but generally it's the 3 cardinal, and then the 4 of the Sheva Mitzvahs. The mnemonic is Aleph, Beis, Gimel, Dalet. Aleph is Ever Menachai, Beis is Birchas Hashem. It works in English, blasphemy, but we don't even say it that way. We say it B'lashon Saginor, blessing God. Gimel is Geneva Gzela, and Dalet is Dinim, to set up a judicial system. But anyways, the Marav folder understands the question is only regarding Avodah Zarah. Look inside the Rasher Ilyo, 2 lines from the top in the right column. Mitzuv Mal Kiddush Hashem. He says it goes for all the Sheva mitzvahs. The Im Omar Melach Legoy. If a powerful man, that's why he says Melach, tells a goy, Avoid Alachas Misheva Mitzvah Va'al Taharoig. Here again, Bifnei Asara. Here again, it's a given that if it's not Bifaresya, the goy is not commanded. Why is that a given? I don't know. But it's a given. Question is he obligated to give up his life, again, either only for Avodah Zarah or for all the Sheva mitzvahs? Let's go back in the Gemara. So Ravimi responded on Malay, and there are really 2 reasons why it's not shaykh for a goy. Kiddush Hashem is only for a Yid. Answer number 1, source number 1, is because since it says, this is the pasuk we had yesterday from Parshas Emor, the Nigdashti b'toich b'nei Yisrael. The Nigdashti b'toich b'nei Yisrael means Yisrael mitzuvah al kiddush Hashem. Ve'ein hagoyim mitzuvah al kiddush Hashem. Now, really, this source is incomplete. Why is it incomplete? Because you can argue that the b'toich b'nei Yisrael is not referring to the one who will be obligated to go al kiddush Hashem. The b'toich b'nei Yisrael will refer to in front of whom. That's what we just learned yesterday. In other words, not on the 3 cardinal sins. When it comes to all the other Avedas, if we're being told to do it because it's against our religion, and Bifaresia. Bifaresia means Barabim. Barabim, we just learned yesterday, Toich Eda Eda. It has to be in front of 10 Jews. B'toich b'nei Yisrael. When am I obligated to? V'nigdashti. B'toich b'nei Yisrael. And because of that question, on this answer of Ravimi, the Gemara brings another answer. Rab Naso, B'Shem Rabbi Lazar, Sham Allah, Menado, he has another source, a better source. Now, really, just to get some background for this story, we're quoting here a pasuk in Malachim, and part of it is relatively known, that Naaman was the great general of the Aramean people, that he contracted Soras, and ultimately he went to Elisha, if you remember the whole story, and how Elisha didn't even look at him. Elisha told him to go bathe 7 times in the Jordan River. And at first, he was very critical of it. Then when he did it, it worked. It was a big miracle. He was extremely grateful. And out of his gratefulness to the Jewish prophet, he took an oath that he will never serve Avodah Zarah again. But right after he took that oath, he realized, oops. He says that when the king of my king, whatever his name was, Melech Aram, when the king would go to his base Avodah Zarah in a place called Nimoin, it was an idol worship church, and the king would bow down in front of the idol, the general's job was to support him in going down and to help him stand up. So he would be bowing down with him. Now, if he wouldn't do it, he would get killed by the king. So right after he took an oath not to serve Avodah Zarah, he told right away Elisha that here's a chayin in that situation. And now I'm reading the words, La davar hazem, when I will be with the king and I'll have to bow down with him, then Yislach Hashem la'avdecha, God will have to forgive me. How nice is it when we decide that God has to forgive me? Now hold on. If a goy is obligated al kiddush Hashem, then why should God forgive him? Then he would have to give his life. Another nuance that the Rasher Elio says, V'nigdashti b'toich b'nei Yisrael. Even according to the question of Rabbi Avuna, that maybe a goy has to give up his life al kiddush Hashem, both in the Marafulda and in the Rasher Elio, the Havamina was only he should give up his life if it's in front of 10 Yidden. It's amazing. And sadly, it comes out that the base Avodah Zarah in Rimoin could have been Rahman and Litzlan in front of 10 Jews. In other words, there's a possibility that when this Naaman would go with Melech Haram and he would, so to say, under coercion, worship the idol, it would be in front of 10 Yidden. And if a goy would be Mitzuv al Kiddush Hashem, how would Naaman be able to say, Hashem Yislach la'avdecha? Is a raya, that's the raya from Rab Nasa, that Yisrael Mitzuvim al Kiddush Hashem. Ve'ein ha-goyim Mitzuvim Al Kiddush Hashem. This is really fascinating.
But do the 10 Jews have to be Shomer Shabbos?
No.
Okay. So even if they're non-believers themselves, let's say, you're still obligated.
Let me go. Let me go before I'll take my. You're asking a practical question, and I'll tell you that nowadays the category of a Jew that's not Shomer Shabbos. Let's go with that approach, especially today's Yud Aleph Nisan, right? The Rebbe was certainly amongst infinite other things was the representation or the representative of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev. He would say that's not a real halachic mechalal Shabbos, that dinoi could be like a mumar.
For mom.
Okay, let's leave it at that. Now, one more thing just to decide. I know this is a huge topic. Another big machlokes rishonim. What happens if a Jew does not give up his life al Kiddush Hashem? And let me speak about the three cardinal ones for which there's a chi of misa. Well, that Jew will be punished. And the Rambam holds clearly, right? We have that in the letter, we have it in the Rambam, Yad HaChazaka, that he won't be chai of misa because he did it under coercion. Other Rishonim hold that the person will be chai of misa for murder, for avodah zarah, for v'chulei. And really, what's underlying that machlokes is the violation that he was not Mekadesh Hashem. For not being Mekadesh Hashem, you're not Chayav Misa. So we'll hold the Rambam. The other Rishonim will hold, no, that if a person, God forbid, murdered, they worshipped an idol when they were not allowed to, so then it's not pshat that they violated the Kiddush Hashem. They violated murder. They violated that sin, for which there's a Chayav Misa. Let's go weiter. We have today a lot of Agadah, which is very unusual. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Abba Bar Zemina, have a machayet gabi chadar moy beroimi. Listen to this unbelievable story. He was a machayet. He was a tailor. For whom? For a not Jewish Aramean Aramoy. And look at this goy isolate beside the nevela, the employer who had a lot of power. Brought to the Yid, to the tailor, he brought him nevela meat, and Amalei, and he told him, Achayil eat. And Amalei, to which Rabbi Abba Bar Zemina told him that Leina Achil. Leina means leis ano. You have to know how the Yerushalmi's lashon. I'm not going to eat it. And the guy told him, you're not going to eat it, I'm going to kill you. Amalei, Achul, you better eat. Because di lochein means the im lochein, ano kotil nolach, I will kill you. I will murder you. Now, what did we just learn? That if it's not befaresya, then you're not allowed to give up your life, even if it's religious persecution. Armalei, Abba Bar Zemina told me, I'm giving up my life. If you want to kill me, kill me. I will not eat non-kosher. The ano leina mechal basar de revelon. And again, we just quoted in our intro that even though the Rambam says, there's a machlokes, that when you're not obligated, you're not allowed to. We see that Yechidei Segula, Elisha Bal Kanafayim, he was going to go al Kiddush Hashem. He tried to avoid it later by removing his tefillin, but he put on tefillin. And we also mentioned that our Rabbeim, they went al Kiddush Hashem. You had Chassidish Yidden that went al Kiddush Hashem for certain things. Even though it wasn't in front of other Jews that never came Machal Shabbos in the gulags. Okay. Amalei, now listen to what this...
but even if it's not in front of Jews, when the story spreads, the impact would be horrible if other Jews found out you did not give up your life for Kiddush Hashem.
I disagree with your horrible. I do agree that it spreads, and therefore it inspires. But don't say exactly. It's horrible, because no one should be tested to give up their lives. Okay. So Amalei, now listen to what happened. So the employer told him that mehein moidaloch. I want you to know the ilu achlat. If you would have eaten the nevela, then I would have killed you. I was testing you to see if you're loyal, and I wanted to know Yehudoi. Either you're a Jew. If you're a Jew, be a Jew. Armoi, you should be an armoi. How great is that? So actually, his attitude, even for not eating treif, and he told him, I'm willing to die for it, that actually saved his life. Amar Rav Mana, says Rav Mana, that Ilu Hava Rab Abba Bar Zemina Shama, if Rab Abba Bar Zemina would have known or would have agreed, either would have known or would have agreed with Milein the Rabbanon, with that which we learned yesterday, that in private, even if it's religious persecution, in private, you're not supposed to give up your life. So Mezal Haba, he would have been a goner. He would have eaten the treifa meat, and the Aramai would have killed him. So either it's good that he never heard of it, or it's good that he didn't agree with it. How great is this? Okay, Atkan, I know it's Atkan, the Sugi of Kiddush Hashem. And now we're coming back to the universe of Shvis. We learned yesterday, okay, that if someone nitaiva v'nidaira, so then there's a knas that you can't use your field the Matzoi Shvis. So question number one is, when someone was nitaiva v'nidaira, we just had this a few daf ago, and therefore they are under the penalty, but that person passed away, the child is the heir. In other words, is the knas on the field, then it doesn't matter if it's him, if it's son, or is the knas on the person, and the son is not penalized for the sins of the parents. So answers the Gemara, Rabbi Yaakov bar Acha and Rabbi Mi b'shem Rabbi Yosef bei Rabbi Chanina. Tiva v'meis, guys, we just learned this above, and we also actually read some of the sugya in the Bavli. B'noi muta l'zoyra. The son will be allowed. The penalty is on the person. However, even though the penalty is on the person, so now what would one think? What happens if someone upgraded their field and then they sold it? You would say then the buyer also won't be penalized. No, they're not. Tiva u'machara asur l'zoyra. The buyer may not do it. How great is that? But here there's a reason for that. Because if a person will be able to get away with that, then the person will upgrade their field, and then they're going to sell it. Prior to a person selling their field, they're going to make more money if they're going to work on Shvius, and they're going to sell to the buyer a field that's already plowed. So that's why, in other words, this is to prevent the guy from violating. No one makes plans to die, but plans to make money, people do. Now, Avar Vizaram. If a person planted it, that means he didn't adhere to the knas. Do we make a knas on the knas? The guy planted it right away, and now because of that he has produce. So here says the Gemara Mutter, the person, he violated Shvis. He didn't subject himself to the knas. We will not penalize the produce. The produce will be permitted. How great is that? It says the Marafulda that people, that it will be too heavy to actually prohibit the produce itself. And the Chazal knew from the outset that people won't listen to it. You see, even this person didn't subject himself to the knas of not planting it l'matzoi shvis. So at kedei kach, they never made it to begin with. Okay. And now let's go back to what we learned yesterday. During the governmental coercion for taxes, we learned yesterday that the Chachamim, they said a Jew is allowed to plow the fields on Shvis. Then we learned yesterday that after a certain amount of time, the government backed off, so they right away said, oh, now we're back to the way it used to be. What we didn't discuss yesterday is an outcome of the relaxation and the reimposing, which is this penalty. In other words, when we were not allowed to plow, that's what we learned in the Mishnah. Nitaiva, right? Nidaira, loy sizra lamatzoi shvis. That penalty obviously was removed when we were allowed to plow. Yes, the Chachamim said you're no longer allowed to plow. That we get. But did the penalty come back? Or maybe the penalty was never reimposed. That's the question that we are discussing right now. And that's the meaning of the words that tiub bisman hazem. After Rabbi Yana yesterday says, you can't do it anymore. The government is not going to confiscate your lands. No more plowing. This Jew plowed. Mao, did the penalty return or did the penalty not return? That was the Gemara's question. If you remember, yesterday we spoke about the Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Yosef. Here they come into play. So the machloikas. Rabbi Yirmiyah savar meimar sharei. I want you to tell you the word share means either there's no penalty, maybe Rabbi Yirmiyah is even saying, no, that now you can plow. Don't forget, we already explained that the only reason why Tosfos in Sanhedrin, even though there was religion coercion, we don't have the right to nullify. We can't take away Isur Dairaisa. It's because we're going with the Mahalach that Shvius Bismanazeh is only Midrabanan. If it's only Midrabanan, they took it away. If they took it away, Rabbi Yirmiyah thought maybe the plowing itself remains permitted. Amalei Rabbi Yoisa, what do you mean? V'loishama Rabbi Yirmiyah shu loika. Loika doesn't mean midoraisa. We're going that it's midrabanan. Loika means what? Doesn't he know that if nowadays, now that there's no more government coercion, now you'll be chayiv makas mardus for plowing? Loishama loishamia. Doesn't Rabbi Yirmiyah know? Didn't he hear that if a person were to plow, even though they are breaking rabbinic law, so what? They become invalid to be witnesses, because that's the big rule. Anyone who, because of financial gain, won't keep to the halachos is no longer trustworthy to be a testimony, to be an aid, because he might be bribed. In other words, he's challenging Rabbi Yirmiyah. So the Gemara says, Chazar ba'amar, in duhu shemiyah. No. Rabbi Yirmiyah knows that. Rabbi Yirmiyah knows that you're not allowed to plow. If someone is plowing today, he's going to get makas mardus. Rabbi Yirmiyah knows if someone is plowing today, he's pasala edus. What he meant to say was savar meimar. In other words, Rabbi Yirmiyah was saying that I don't fully agree with it. Really, what that means, interesting, what Rabbi Yirmiyah himself was saying, that if, so to say, if it would be up to me, I wouldn't even give makas mardus for plowing. I wouldn't even do that. I know that he'll get it, but I don't agree with it. And therefore, what he is saying with that is that the penalty that the Mishnah said of loy sizra lamatzoi shvis lokula alma, the penalty was removed when Rabbi Yanai removed the whole derabanan, no doubt. Even though they put back the Isur Darabanan, Rabbi Yirmiyah is saying, I don't even fully agree with that. I agree with it. But I am holding, that's what Rabbi Yirmiyah meant to say, is that the penalty was not put back. That is what that is what Rabbi Yerushalmi is saying. Basically, Rabbi Yoisa, who challenged him, argues with Rabbi Yerushalmi. In other words, in a chap that it's a machlekes between Rabbi Yerushalmi and Rabbi Yoisa. Rabbi Yerushalmi is lenient. He holds that even though, everyone holds the Gezerah was put back on, the general midrabanan, you can't plow on Shviz. If someone plowed on Shviz, will they be penalized on Matzoi Shviz? Rabbi Yerushalmi holds no. Rabbi Yoisa holds, Now, turning to the Chav Chasam Beis. Omar Rab Chizkiah. The question will be Al Shitas Rabbi Yirmiyah. Even though the Gezerah was reimposed, the penalty was not reimposed. Once they took away the Gezerah, the penalty went away forever. That itas vat kumi Rabbi Yirmiyah. I, Rab Chizkiah, challenged Rabbi Yirmiyah. V'chi ein zeh based in Amad ubitel. In other words, the only reason why the penalty was removed because the Chazal, because of the government, they removed the Gezerah. Right away, when they put back the Gezerah, it should come by itself. Look inside the top Marafulda. V'chi ein zeh, second line, top line, second line. V'chi ein zeh based in Amar ubitel lama nataloi l'zroya. V'loi name ahoy l'batel Gezerah havelei ka'amad based in ubitel sheyachzed adav l'yoshna. In other words, the moment the government was not putting coercion, so it's like a Beis Din makes a Gezerah, Beis Din removes the Gezerah. Here they remove the heter. Once they remove the heter, everything should be asur again. Okay, so therefore, I disagree with the logic behind Rabbi Yirmiyah. However, the Gemara says, I will actually find you a source that will be a proof that Rabbi Yirmiyah is right. Says the Gemara, Cheilei, his koyach of Rabbi Yirmiyah, you have a kasha, will come from the following braisa. Now, before we read the braisa inside, let me just share you a few words of introduction. Number one, truma can only be consumed by a kohen. Number two, if truma is tamei, then the truma belongs to you. But since you can't eat it, you have to burn it. But you are allowed to benefit from burning it, benefiting it, using it as fuel, benefiting it by using it as warmth, you can benefit from the burning of Truma Tameya. But just like when it comes to consumption, a non-kohen is not allowed to consume Truma. Even when it's Tameh, only the kohen is allowed to have benefit from the burning of the Truma. This is Midrabanan. Midrabanan. Now there is a nuance that if a kohen is benefiting from the burning of the Truma, a Jew, a non-kohen, can also benefit with him. So let's say it's cold, so you want to warm up the room. So you have food that you can't eat. It's became Tameh, Truma food. So you're using it as fuel. It makes no difference whether there's one person in the room or whether there's 10 people in the room. So if a kohen is benefiting from, it's called hana'af of the shalkiloi, of its consumption, of its destruction, a Jew can join. But a non-kohen by himself, midrabanan, is not a lot of hana'af from Truma Tameya. Now that you know these words of introduction, now we'll get the Braisa. Says the Braisa, Bas Yisrael, who is not a kohen, not she's a kohen, not her father's a kohen, not she's married to a kohen, that she wants to take fire from a kohenes, bas kohenes, married to a kohen. So says the Braisa, Toiveles esapsila, shemen sreifa, she can dip her wick into shemen sreifa. Shemen sreifa is code for Truma Tameya. If oil became Tameh, the only thing you can do with the oil is to burn it. That's called shemen sreifa. She's allowed to use it. The Braisa is basically saying that a non-kohen is allowed to benefit, burn, have benefit from the burning of Truma Tameya, even though no kohen is there. That's what the Braisa says. A bas Yisrael can take it. How is that possible? That's a midrabanan. You're not allowed to do that. And the answer must be, and we'll see, this answer will be a backup to Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rab Chuna b'shem deveis Rab Yanai. That this Braisa is speaking about a time, Sha'as Mishlacha Ze'evim Hoisa. There was a time when wolves were wandering into cities. I want you to know, my friends, that it's the nature of a wolf to run away from fire. The Isur of a non-kohen benefiting from Truma Tameya is only midrabanan. And whenever there was a sakana, the wolves were there, at that time they rescinded this gezerah. That's it. It's called Shas Moshe Gezer Moisa. And V'loy Omad Bezdin Ubitel. Kama the Tema Taman Loy Omad Bezdin Ubitel. V'chaloy Omad Bezdin Ubitel. Oh, so what are we trying to say from over here? That after the danger went away, we don't find that it became asur again. We don't say, when it was dangerous, it's asur. Then it was reimposed. We don't say that. Once there was a shas mishlach haze'evim, and they took away this isur midrabanan of a non-kohen benefiting from Truma Tameya, so it remained. So here also, v'chalei amad bezdin ubitel yovaldik. Now, just to make it clear, no one is saying that after the government backed off, we are allowed to plow on Shvis. No one is saying that. But what we are saying is that the penalty imposed in the Mishnah, according to Rabbi Yirmiyah, never returned. Like we find in other scenarios when there was a time where an Isur D'Rabbanan was removed, it doesn't automatically get reimposed. It doesn't work that way. So therefore, again, there's a machlokes between Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Yosa. Rabbi Yosa is machmir, and Rabbi Yirmiyah is lenient. And now that's the meaning of the next word, udekavasa. Just like we find the machlokes Rabbi Yirmiyah and Rabbi Yosa. Rabbi Yirmiyah is the machmir, Rabbi Yosa is the mekel. Now the Gemara is going to quote another machlokes between these two amirayim, in which Rabbi Yirmiyah is the mekel and Rabbi Yosa is the machmir. What's this machlokes over here? Guys, this is beautiful. This is the majority of the people didn't fully understand that on Shviz, the produce on their field is not theirs. Everyone left their fields open. They left the fields open because the Torah says so. But many people understood, I have to allow everyone to partake like me. But when I take the fig off my tree, it's mine already. It's on my land. They viewed it as theirs. Lamai nafkimina. We're speaking about hilchas kinyanim. When you go into a hefker field and you take a product, you acquire it because you want to acquire it, and you do the kinyan of either hagba'ah, or like we said, if you put it into a basket, or if someone put it into your basket is like your chatzir, and your chatzir acquires for you even if you don't even know it's there. Kinyanim only work because two things happened. There was the actual kinyan, and there was your kavana, your gemiras das to acquire. Here, the topic is when a person doesn't know that they need to acquire it. They think it's already theirs. So if they make a hagba'ah, lekula alma, if the owner with the wrong understanding takes his produce off his trees, it's not really his, he won't acquire it. So therefore, if he passes away before he eats it, his son does not inherit from him. It was never his. Question is, if he puts it in his basket, since Kaylee works as chatzir, and my chatzir acquires from me even if I don't even know it's there, so you don't need to have that much knowledge. So maybe, even though I think it's already mine, maybe my basket will acquire it from me. That's where there's a machlokes Rabbi Yerushalmi and Rabbi Yosef. Let's read it inside. From when, if ever? So Rabbi Yirmiyah says, Savar Meimar. I know, I agree. Making hagba'ah, picking it off the tree won't work because you think it's yours. But now that you put it into your keli, Savar Meimar, that Mishayitman, the Toich Kelov, now you will acquire it. You think it's already yours, but like we said, because Kinyan Chatzir doesn't need to have your knowledge. However, Rabbi Yosef is more machmir. Rabbi Yosef Savar Meimar. Not only will hagba'ah not work, why? We're speaking about the majority of the people. And the guys, if someone knows the halacha, someone came to learn shvius over here, and he knows that it's not yours. By the way, there's a machlokes rishonim. It's called whether it is afkata de malka, whether God was mafked it, or whether the owner was mafked it. Whichever way we're going to learn, it's not yours. If someone knows it's not yours, then for sure that person will acquire it by hagbah and by putting it into the keli, into the basket. But most people didn't know that. The ihu savar the inundi day, the lays inundi day. Oh, but it's not his. Since it's not his, now the question is, what about kinyan chatzir? So I just want to tell you, Rabbi Yossi has a gavaldi. By a kinyan chatzir, guys, all that is lacking is knowledge. But if I were to know that something is in my chatzir, I would want to acquire it. Here it's even worse. It's not about knowing if something is there or not. Here I never intend to acquire it because I think it's already mine. Gavaldik. That's why Rabbi Yossi says there will be no kinyan. And now the Gemara says, Kahadon, I will find you a story that will back up Rabbi Yossi's opinion. We have twice in Shas a story how Rabbi Tarfon got into trouble when he was taking produce from his own field. One in the Bavli, and this is a different story in the Yerushalmi. It's late. Maybe before the next class, we'll speak out the story in the Bavli. But here's the story. Rab Tarfon Yarad Lechol Ketzias Metoich Shaloi. Rab Tarfon went into his field, and he took, Ketzias means pressed figs, right? Te'enim are moist. Pressed figs, Shaloi B'toiva. So let me say two things. First of all, if you remember, in the beginning of this halacha, we learned Shitas Beis Shammai, like whom we don't paskin, not Rabbi Yehuda's version of Beis Shammai. Our version of Beis Shammai, that when I go into your field on Shvi'is to take your produce, Beis Shammai holds, I am not allowed to thank you. Beis Hillel holds, I don't have to thank you. I could thank you. Beis Shammai says, Shaloi B'toiva. I want to remind everyone that in the first Masechta of Brachas, in Mishnayis, we have two stories, two mices in Mishnayis, very rare, in the same Perek. Right, the first in the first Mishnah, and then I think it's in Daf Yud Aleph. I think Reb Mendel knows Brachas good. I forgot what Daf, but there, Machlekes Beis Shammai Misil how to recite Shema at night, right? And Beis Shammai says you have to recite the Shema at night b'shach b'cha, laying down. And Rab Tarfon lay down, Ki Beis Shammai, and Listim came and they almost killed him because he followed the same thing over here. So let's go. First of all, when I walk into my field on Shvi'is, it was common for people to have guards on their fields, in their fields on Shvi'is. not because they were preventing other people from entering. That's awesome. People had shoymnim on their fields because even though everyone is allowed to enter to take the food, but I don't want people to trample on areas in my field that they're going to ruin the land for next year. I'm allowed to stop people from ruining my land. It was common that the fields were open, people had guards. Rab Tarfon had workers that never even met him. He was a wealthy man, a wealthy Yid. If they would know that he's Rab Tarfon, they would give him preferential treatment. That for sure is Asad on Shvius, because it's open to everyone. So Aleph, Rab Tarfon never told the workers that I am the owner at that point. They thought he's a stranger. Rab Tarfon followed Beis Shammai. Beis Shammai holds, you don't even say thank you. Beis Hillel says you could. The workers were upset at this Jew not knowing he's the owner. Why didn't he say thank you? To the Shoimrim. It's amazing. Yeah, because they represent the owners. Say thank you, garnished. So he walked into his field. He took, now there's another nuance here, that he took the pressed figs. Pressed figs were already in a keli of the owner. I'll spit that out in a moment. So he took these dried figs. Now the watchmen saw him. Again, they didn't know he's Rab Tarfon. They thought he's a stranger. They saw he didn't think. They didn't know that. We follow Beis Hillel. They were so upset at him for him not thanking them that they began to beat him. They began to beat him. His life was in danger. Oh, now when he started to feel when he saw that his life is in danger, Amaloin, to protect himself, he said, I'm asking you, by your very lives, Emrun Goybese, the Tarfin, go and tell the household members of Tarfin that Atadin lay Tachrichin, go prepare Tachrichin. The Tarfin is about to get killed. He needs Tachrichin. They realized from that, he was saying, I'm Rab Tarfon. Kachamun came when they heard this from him, is Ishtatchun alapeon, they fell on their faces, and they bet Mechila. And Amrun Lay, they told him, Rebbe, Sharilan, forgive us. Daf Chavtes on the top. Amaloin, so he told him that Yeh say a lie, whether it means that I deserve to get hurt, coming to me. When it comes to the forgiveness, he told him, even prior to you requesting, I already forgave you. For every blow, I forgave you. I'll call chutar v'chutar. The moment you gave me one beating, the havenachis olai that fell on me, havena shari l'chayin al kadmaya, I already forgave you. In other words, I was already moichel you. Now, hold on. What's the raya? The raya is mamash gavaldik. It's a little bit complex. The Mara explains the raya. The raya is like this, that if the whole thing, as we'll see in a moment, is Rab Tarfon did not listen to Beis Shammai. Beis Hillel is, and what does Beis Shammai say? That you can't say thank you. You can't say thank you because it doesn't belong to you. If it belongs to the owner, then let's read the Marafulda.
He doesn't need to say thank you anyway.
Yeah, I'm just going to get at the right person over here. So it's the second line of Marafulda. Stam ktsiois, dried figs is la'achar shekitzus anateinim. It's after you cut the fresh figs. Mino ilan. After you put them in the kalim. The salim shemalaktim oisam bahem harei shaloi hoya. Whoever this person was, it wasn't Rab Tarfon. It was in his baskets. That's the thing. Why did he allow himself to get beaten? Must have been because he knew it did not belong to him. Again, we didn't know because if it would have belonged to him, I got the him. The him is to the owners of the field. It means the workers were the ones that took it off the field and they made it dried. Everyone thought he's a stranger. He should have told them thank you, even if he follows Beis Shammai. Why? Because now that they put it into their kalim, if the keli would acquire it, now it belongs to the owner. They were generous. They allowed that to happen because you can take the fresh figs, so they allowed the dry figs. It's amazing that ayah. Is that ayah that putting it into the keli doesn't do anything. It remained something that's hefker. Since it remained something that's hefker, This goes back into the machlokes Beishamai and Beisilil, whether you could think, whether you cannot think. He went ahead and he didn't thank them. He was following Beishamai, and that's why Be'ilan Tartan Milaya says the Gemara, Noagrab Tarfan Keveshamai. Twice we find that he followed Beishamai, and because of that, he put himself in danger. One is Bahada, in this case, where what? Again, according to Rabbi Yosef, it still belonged to the owner. No one knew he's the owner. And because of that, he didn't think, and he got beaten up for that. And the second story was the first, like we said in the first Perek of Brachas, Ubekriya Shema. Now, the end of the story is, I know it's very late, that Rabbi Bo, B'Shem Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, I want you to know that Kol Yom of Shel Rabbi Tarfon, for the rest of the life of Rabbi Tarfon, Misan al Davar Azay fasted to do tshuva for this incident. What did he do wrong? Not that he followed Beishamai, that he saved his life by revealing who he is. He regretted that. And he said, Oy li, shenis chabadati bekisra shal Torah. Woe is it to me that I benefited from telling people who I am. Now, what does it mean? We're just learning the whole story of Kiddush Hashem. You should have gotten beaten to death. We just learned you're not allowed to give up your life. That Rambam says it's suicide.
Exactly.
Oh, so the Rash Shadilio says he should have bribed them. He could have saved his life by giving them a few dollars. I'm Brazilian, I get that. An American doesn't always think about bribing right away. Instead of bribing the people that were beating him, he was Megalo, I'm Rab Tarfin. And that is something that he should not have done post facto, because that's called he being mishtamish b'kisra shel Torah. How great is that?
He was not a masochist, was he?
What was that?
He was not a masochist.
No.
This story brought as a riot
to Rabbi Yosef, that even after you put it into the Kalim, it still remains Pedus of Shvius, which is subject to the Machlokes Beishamai and Beisilil, and therefore him not thinking is Kebeishamai.
Amazing.
Let me go, Danny. If 1 second, if Kaylee is coin, I know how it works. If Kaylee is coin, then who does it belong to? Belong to him. He shouldn't have allowed himself to be beaten. That's what he's saying. He would not have allowed himself. He was allowing himself to be beaten because he knew they're beating him because he followed Beishamai. But if the emes is that he already acquired it, you should have told him in 1 second. He should have said right away, I'm the owner, I'm Rab Tarfon, it's mine. He allowed himself to be beaten and he forgave them because he understood how they were viewing him wrong by following